Okay, it's my pleasure to welcome those on board, and it's a session that will be led by Bruno Belhoste. Bruno is a long-time FactGrid member. Came onto the database. Oh, there's one more person to let in. Just let me press this button. Bruno, how long have you been on FactGrid? 2019? I think 2019, 18,
3 years, yes, maybe. I don't remember, but
Bruno's
like
a history of
3 years,
a professor of history of the sciences who taught in Paris at universities and who then became director of the Institute of Early Modern and Contemporary History. And he contacted us with the idea to bring his mesmerists into FactGrid, and that has been a major technical challenge where we all learned a lot about how to do that. I remember that we tried to avoid a couple of mistakes which we made when we started with German Illuminati. Like this time we introduced all French places to make it easier to connect to them. And we started things slightly more organized than we did with the German first data sets a year earlier. And I've learned incredibly much from Bruno, particularly his way of searching Sparkle. This is still mysterious to me, but you are, Bruno, admirable in this, finding ways to run searches on this machine. And Bruno's latest project after the Mesmerists has been what we called Paris to Download, a project that supplies all the addresses and streets of Paris, easy to download, easy to connect to. I wish this would become a model for other cities like London to download or Venice to download. It would be incredibly cool to be able to spot things on historical maps and in historical cities. So maybe we can learn from you how to do such a thing and what to get out of such a thing.
Okay,
The floor is yours.
I hope it will be helpful, yes. So as you know, in fact, I was interested in Paris in 19th century, intellectual Paris in 19th century. I wrote a book on Paris in 18th century, and I planned to make a suite with Paris in 19th century. So I had many data, of course, as historian. And so in fact, I used a directory which was published in 1834, which was a directory of intellectuals, of writers, in fact, in Paris. And the point which was interesting that there were addresses in this directory, of course, because it's a directory, and about between about 1,700 people, so a huge number. So I thought it could be interesting, but of course, to make this useful, I needed to have the geocoding. It means the localization, the coordinates of the addresses. And it was the starting point of the project Paris to Download. And Olaf gave me the advice to put this on FactGrid, because at the beginning it was only for my research on Paris, intellectual Paris, and finally I'm very happy to have this, to have put this on FactGrid. So the goal, of this project is to make resources on the history of Paris available through FactGrid to the general public, and especially, in fact, addresses and localization in general. It's the ID, the main ID, and you can see my and read my my note on the blog I wrote a blog, not blog. So I will be very practical in this presentation. So I propose to show you a first example of query about which will use the data of Paris to download. So here is the first. I suppose you can see the query.
Yes.
So there is this query, buildings in Paris. So it's a very simple query, as you see. Here I define the item as buildings, and you know here I made I don't remember the name of this techniques is path query. I don't remember, but you know, it's not only P2 but also all the subclasses. So in this query, I can get not only the buildings but all kinds of buildings. That's the idea. So it's very important. I suppose you know that, but it's very important to use these kind of query paths. I don't remember the technical terms. So here is the first line, the buildings, and very easy here. It's the item belongs to the project Paris to download. And so if I click, I have the list, not so many, in fact, because I developed, I started developing a research about theaters in the 19th century. So I have the list of theaters in the 19th century, of course, with the address. So if you see, for instance, this one, Théâtre du Luxembourg, you have instance of, you can make different kind of instance. And the place, the beginning, that's very important to have a limitation, time limits, and the address here. So maybe I can show you an image. And that's all, I think. Yes, and some information, and of course the coordinates. So you can have a map. If I come back here, it's possible to have a map, I suppose. No.
Nope, you have to ask
yes,
for the
because it's not,
geocoordinates as
of
well.
course, it's not here. And but if I do up, okay, and so the map.
So that's all the theaters.
Sorry?
That was all the theaters in Paris.
Yes, it's all. No, not only the theaters. You have also Paris, for instance, the Eiffel Tower, I suppose, right there. No, it's not. It's all the monuments, all the building, Hôtel de l'Arsenal. No, it's of course the Tour Eiffel is here. Eiffel Tower is here. Okay. So it's the first example, very simple example, and yes. So the core of the project is geocoding. And geocoding is to have the coordinates of the addresses. It's a technical term for having georeferencing the addresses. So in the case of, in every city, you have the a specific system of house numbering. So in Paris, there is a system of house numbers since the end of the 18th century, and it's a very it's not very complex, but there is a whole story about the so no, I'm lost in this. Sorry. So, most of the addresses in Paris are, in fact, comes from the early in the 19th century and have not changed, in fact, since early 19th century. So it makes things easier, but there are many, many, many exceptions, unfortunately. Many new streets, new buildings on streets, and so shifting of numbers. So it's very complex, of course. And maybe you know that Paris was extended during the 19th century. So in 1860, Paris tripled or something like that. And of course, many new streets, many new house numbers after 1860. So geocoding addresses is a very complex thing, having the coordinates, and of course, for historians of Paris, it's a classical problem. It's a classical problem, and there are some tools, but not so many, in fact. And fortunately, we have now some data sets which were established quite recently. So in fact, in Paris, we have two data sets. A data set which was created by historians, a project which is called Alpage, which is about Paris. And it used an atlas, in fact, cadastre in French. I don't remember how you say in English. It's a cadastre which was established in early 19th century, which is called Atlas Vassero. And so in this Atlas Vassero, there were the numbers of houses were put. And so somebody, it was a very long work, of course, created a data set in 2010. And so here you can find it's in fact grid. So I use the viewer here to make an example. And here, there is the data set is here. You can click to get the data set. So I had this data set, and also very important, now you have a data set available on the official site of Paris, Data Paris, which is quite new, and you can get the geocoding of the addresses, the recent addresses. So I used mainly these two data sets, but of course also many other tools, maps, old maps, and I was not able, in fact, to get all the addresses. I got, and I put on FiGrid the 19th century addresses within the district, the arrondissements of Paris before 1860, which is quite an improvement. Really, it's changed everything for people working in Paris at that time. So the geocoding is mainly based on the Vassero Alpage dataset, but with many supplements. I worked a lot to improve the dataset. So now there is on FiGrid really a very useful collection of addresses. And the next step would be, of course, to enlarge the address set to the new arrondissements after 1860. And the first step would be to put the data set of today on the on FireGrid, which is about the data set now of addresses. There are 28,000 addresses, and the all addresses now it's something like I don't remember exactly, but 120,000 addresses, something like that. It's huge, but as you know, it's possible with FireGrid. It's amazing, but it's you can have this. Alors, I will show you the data model behind this project of addresses. Yes, here the data model. I will. So it's very. There are labels. The label of an address is very simple. You have Paris first, the street name, and the number of the building. Yeah, here an example: Paris, Rue de la Paix, number 3. It's in French, in English, in German. You can choose the and of course it depends on the house numbering system, because there was several numbering systems. You can have several Paris Rue de la Paix number 3, depending on the house numbering. So in this case, I will show you. Here is it's a FireGrid viewer. Paris Rue de la Paix number 3. So you have the here a map, the localization on the map, and you see there are localization in the street. For each number, you have the localization in the street. So you have the street, you have the quarter, and the quarter is something which is in a Parisian arrondissement. You have several quarters, and you have Paris, of course, which can be quite useful in the queries. You have the house numbering system. In this case, is the first house numbering system in 18th century, 19th century. And here you have the geocoordinates, the geocoding, and with the not a technical reference and the data set. So the reference here. So if you go to the yeah, it's the same thing with the presentation. Okay. So now it's the simplest case, because you have only one in the case of Rue de la Paix. In FireGrid, you have only the house numbers of the system of 1805, but there are sometimes renumberings, and I said so. For instance, here is the case of the street. So I will use the viewer, because you know it's the street is Paris Rue René Boulanger, but Paris Rue Boulanger, the former name was Rue de Bondy. Rue de Bondy until Second War, World War II. René Boulanger, I think, was a resistant. I don't know exactly, but it was after World War II. So here you have the localization, and here, so you have the house numbers. So, you know what's interesting here, that you can see all the numbers of in the street, in this in the viewer. Up, for instance, here, and you have, that's the point. What I wanted to show you, you have the renewal of the house numbering in Paris. So you have two system of numbering in this case. So for instance, here I will show you this one. For instance, yes, this one. Up. So number 26. So it's number 26 in 1805. And here, so you have the house numbering system. It's written here, the coordinate, and you have continued by. So you can go the new numbering. The new number is 32, and this number 32 is in mid 19th century, and I think it's the number today. So you see, it's very complex, and I have the new renumbering in the case of Rue de Bondy, Rue René Boulanger, because there was a theater, in fact, there. So I have to look on the localization. So I made the new the shift from the first numbering to the new numbering, but it's a case of René Boulanger, but it's a huge work, of course, to do. There are some tools, but not so many. In fact, it's very tricky. It's very tricky. But in the future, and if some people can help, you can imagine to have this kind of system, and I will go to the next, and you can, of course, have queries using the data set, the data model. So it's very easy how to get all the addresses. Oh, it doesn't work. I don't know why. So yes, it's amazing. Yes, I don't know. It doesn't work. So, it's in this case it works. So for instance, I will show you can have in this case I will show you all the maps of the Quartier des Champs-Élysées. All the maps of the Quartier des Champs-Élysées. So here there is the Champs-Élysées. So I use this trick to make values and to create variable. It's very useful because you can reuse the same query and change only the the name of the quarter. Yeah, and you can put several. You can, for instance, I can put another. I don't know. Nouvelle. So here I have two, not one, but two quarters. So it's quite useful. So here there are some information. There are notes. Sometimes I wrote notes, and here that's useful, but it's very technical. It's not very well conceived, I think. But it's to have the references. You have to use this very specific provide was derived from to get the references. And here, I get this, and so I have the map. And for instance, here, so Quartier des Champs-Élysées. Yes, it's here. So I have this map, directly. So I put very many maps. Of course, these kind of maps are very useful because they have the house numbers are on the maps. Here, of course, it's here. If you see the Quartier des Champs-Élysées, you can see there is this kind of map, which is not in the query. And there is the maps and plans, and several maps and plans with online images. In this case, not in references. So there are many information, in fact, and with the query, it's possible to get them relatively easily. It's not very difficult. Oh, no. I had another. I would like to show you another. I don't know why. Oh yes, this one. So now I will show you how to use these addresses in a project. In fact, it's interesting when you have data with addresses. For instance, if you get data from directories, you can use this data from directories to create maps, and it's very impressive. So I will show you this example. So it's my research project about the intellectual Paris. So I use the directory I spoke about in 1834, and so here is the query. Yes, here is the query. So the literary and scholarly world of Paris after 1830. So here you have, so I made some commentary to help. Instance of human, of course, Q7. My project of research, literary Paris. The address here, here it's address, it's in French, I'm sorry. Here it's the coordinates, the geo-referencing. And of course, I have to make it can be useful to tell that it's addressed in Paris. In some case, you can have bad surprises. So here I put as optional the portrait of the author, and here it's a little bit technical. It's to add the viewer, to have the link to the viewer, to be able to show the information on the viewer. So up. There are more than 1,150. So here you have the result. So, if you look, for instance, this one, no, it's not very famous. I will take somebody who is more, maybe this one. No. Honoré de Balzac. It's very good. Honoré de Balzac. You have Honoré de Balzac. You have the localization. So he lived there, Rue Fortuné. He was Rue Fortuné. In fact, in this case, in my query, I didn't make any time limits. I didn't put any time limits. So it's not only in this case, in fact, I know that Rue Fortuné, he was not Rue Fortuné in 1834. He went to Rue Fortuné later because I forgot to put a time limits filter. But it's not. So, what can be useful? You know, here, the table, if you see the table, you know, it's very easy. I suppose you know how to do that. So another example, and it will be the last one. It's more sophisticated. It's more sophisticated because I created two layers on the same to have, in fact, not only one group of dots, but two groups of dots. So in this map, you have the people who are the playwrights and the people who are the scholars on the same maps. And for that, I created two. So you have the first group here, and with union, you can have a second group. And with this very technical stuff, you can create two layers. And with this kind of query, you can have this kind of map, you know. So you have not one, you have two. So it's very interesting because you can see that in this, the playwright in blue and the scholars in orange, and you can see that the distribution is not the same. And so it gives really interesting information. It could have been very difficult without this kind of, of system. So that's all for me. So I'm ready to try to answer questions. If you have some questions.
Well, maybe I break the ice with a couple of ideas and statements. It's cool to have these searches, but anyone outside the system doesn't know that you can actually run these searches and that you will find the information on them. So far, we're dealing with sample searches mostly. That is, we create searches that yielded interesting results, and then we offer these searches for the others at our project pages or on the sample search page. And then you can take a look at that search and you can say, okay, I'm not really interested in playwrights. I'm more interested in, let's say, philosophers. So these are the values I have to change to then get the Parisian philosophers. But that's not extremely useful because you have to know what is inside the database before you run your first search, and you have to find these sample searches before you get an idea what it actually could offer you. Do you see a way in the future that we might get simple user interfaces that use the database to run normal searches, whatever normal searches are? I don't have a clear idea of what this is, but we must eventually serve customers who just want to know where are the authors in Paris in 1840, or where can I go to a theater on July
You
5th.
know, in my view, the system, the queries, the Sparkle queries are very powerful. Sparkle queries are very powerful, and you can get all the information you want. But the system, the display system, is limited. It means that you have to you have to get the data and use another tools and softwares to make to exploit the data. I think it's limited, and I don't believe it's possible to really have more powerful tools inside the FatGrid, in fact.
Not inside. You have to create them in a way you created the viewer.
Yes, but
So
you can, of course, you can very easily get the data with the CSV, or,
exactly.
so there is no problem.
Yeah,
And you can make some tests with this system. It's not so easy with several layers, unfortunately.
absolutely.
It's
So
not
what we
very easy.
need is some future development of tools
Yes, yes,
that
why
know
not?
to ask the database, and then
But
we need the questions people will ask to program the tools so that the tools interact with the machine.
no, theoretically, it's possible. Of course, it's
Yeah.
possible. But
Um,
you need to have people working on that.
exactly. Another thing I realized listening to your talk is that your data model is slightly different from the one I used for Gotha, where I started with creating a map. You actually created different items under different name systems.
Yeah.
When they changed the naming system, you also created new items for that. I wonder I wouldn't have done this because I felt like the house is always the same and the name is just the surface. So I wouldn't have created new items just because the name is changing. I sticked in the Gotha case with the old with just one object, and I said the names are just changing on this object from time to time. I'm just wondering, what would you do if people if you
You know,
locate people on this, like you have people residents in a house,
mhm.
and the name changes, that looks like they are moving from one house to another, just because a new volume of numbering systems has been brought out, but in fact they still live in the same house.
You know, first, of course, I'm dependent on the sources. So I thought about this, and it was not possible to. It's not possible to know, for instance, directly or automatically, if the address today is the same as the address in early 19th century. So there is no real way. It would be very complex. Maybe it's possible, but you need a specific program, and so I thought it was easier to create different items, and of course, if you in a second the second step is to make the connection between the different numbers at different time with continuation, and
Yeah,
it's not the only model possible, of course. It shows this because of the sources, and maybe I was wrong. I don't know.
I don't.
I thought about this. I remember, and I thought it was the easiest solution, I would say. And so there is a real problem how to know that an address in late 19th century is the same as the address in early 19th century.
Absolutely, we have the same problem.
Uh, you can make comparisons on maps, compare maps, and you can, of course, it's possible to, maybe it's possible anyway. With I think it's possible with Sparkle to define a zone. You know, you have a point on the map, and you can define a zone around the point, and to ask if the address is on the zone. and you have to create a program, in fact.
Yeah. Well, we have the same problem with quota, where a complete
It's
quarter of
possible,
this
huh?
industry.
But you need to Python program or something like that. It's not so difficult, in fact, but you have to do it.
How difficult would you think is it to get the community of researchers use what you have been doing? I mean, lots of people are exploring Paris in the 19th century. They are reading letters of famous authors, and
Yeah.
they get information about the addresses. And many people think of to visualize connections between people on a city map. Instead of doing it from the scratch freshly, they should be able to use what you have been doing, and to say, okay, that's my person. Okay, it's that same person here on the database, and that's the house number I get, so I can locate my person I'm writing about on this map. I can change the database object and say this person was a resident of this house. How difficult do you think is it to actually move the researchers onto the platform and to explain to them how can they colonize
It's
your
difficult.
work?
It's quite sure it's difficult. I experienced that it's very difficult. People are not very interested in this kind of technology, in technology in general. They don't like it. So it's difficult. My opinion is that, first of all, you have to be patient, and you have to make presentations like this. And I think it will be a slow process, but accelerating. It's my bid. So I think it will accelerate. But it's difficult. It's very difficult. I've very few. I think the to have all these uh, addresses accessible. It's really amazing, and it would be very helpful for many people working in Paris. But the fact is that very few reactions.
Yeah, I had the same problem here at the far
It's very difficult.
smaller town with the historical association of the city, and they found it amazing that they could suddenly get all the houses of the city and that they could connect their information to it, but they didn't start. They didn't really want to start. They were all in their own projects, and the very idea of a collective space where they can use infrastructure that is already there, it didn't really have a charm on those people
No, but
in the
in
small
my
town.
view, in my opinion, young scholars, people, I don't know, PhD students or people like this, could be interested.
Yeah.
And but it's a long process.
Hmm.
It's a long process, unfortunately.
What advice would you give someone who was about to create something similar for, let's say, London or Venice?
But first of all, they need to have the sources. The sources, it's the most difficult part of the work is to get the sources. So because it's huge if you don't have the data set already made by somebody. It's a huge. It's monstrous.
Yeah.
So in my case, somebody did the work. It's wonderful, and the the geocoding was made in 2010, 12 years ago. Nobody interested in it. Nobody. I'm the first one to have noticed that it existed.
And the person who did this work, how did he react on your proposal to use his data?
Oh, she was very happy. She
Okay.
said yes, no problem. And the head of the project is a colleague of mine in Paris One. Yeah, she said it's very no problem. But nobody used that. Nobody. Because you can use the data set directly. It's not the fact grid tool is very useful, but it's not absolutely necessary. You can use the data set directly, but nobody. So really, it's a problem of information to get people involved, to get probably the general problem for digital humanities. It's quite isolated, and historians are very skeptical about this.
On the other hand, we constantly see new projects arriving. I saw a project on Hamburg and authors in Hamburg around 1700 that used a historical map. I saw something about historical map of Amsterdam. So this is nothing that new. It's something we see on lots of projects.
But it's isolated. It's just in silo.
Exactly.
Silo. It's isolated. It's not shared.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
no,
should be the inspiration
what's
to share.
Interesting in PackGrid is the fact that you share.
Yeah.
It's a main point.
Exactly.
You share between users of PackGrid, of course, and you share with people outside PackGrid.
Exactly. Anyone can download any search you have just demonstrated.
It's
a download
important.
link with it. And you can have the data set so that you can put it in an Excel spreadsheet. We tested it on Kepler, where you can just feed data into another tool. It's simple. We are not at the point of understanding how simple it has suddenly become.
But probably, this kind of initiative like videos could be very useful because young people use videos. And no, really, not only a discussion like this, but really a sort of course. Very simple, very straightforward, very practical.
Okay. Time is run up anyway for this thing that was supposed to be a coffee talk series. If there are no further questions, I'm extremely thankful for the demonstrations. They will be online on YouTube, so anyone can watch your searches, see your searches, and use them, and we'll see how it develops.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Listen to my presentation. I hope it would have been useful. So, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
And see you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.